In this tutorial we'll look at how to turn the values that we've collected in an experiment into a graph using Microsoft Excel. So in this particular experiment what we did is we took some masses starting at 0.05 kilograms, which is 50 grams, through 50 gram increments up to half a kilogram, and suspended it from a spring balance to measure the amount of force that was required to hold this mass in the air. This value of mass was our independent variable. That was the variable that we, the experimenter, changed. And over here we have the dependent variable, because this value changed depended on the mass. So to insert a graph, we start by going up and inserting. Go to the Insert tab, and we want to insert a scatter graph. And we don't want any line on it, so we choose that first one. We can easily resize this window where the chart will go, and that'll make it a bit easier for us to work. So inside this graph area we right click on our mouse and we go to select data, and a new window will come up. You notice here it says horizontal for this box here. That'll be the horizontal axis, which is our independent variable, which means this one over here will form our y-axis, which is the dependent variable or force in this case. And at the moment no data is selected, so we want to add some data. Series name will be the title given to the graph, which is up here, force versus mass. So we add that into there. Our series X values, the values that are going to go on the X or horizontal axis, that is our independent variable. Those are the values that we have for mass. Our series Y values, we want to get rid of that one there, will be our values of force. And you'll probably note that even before I click OK, what it has done now is that as the graph has changed the values on the x-axis, changed the values on the y-axis, and plotted the data points that represent the points on the table here. So if we press OK, we go back to this window, it all looks good to us, we press OK, and we have the basis of a graph, but we are missing some things in this graph. Up in the chart tools we have a design tool, and one of the options here under chart layouts, you'll see that it has a space up the top of the graph, a small bit down the left hand side, and a bit down below the graph. These are for labels on our graph. So if we choose that, you notice that what has now happened is we can put in an axis title for our y-axis and an axis title for our x-axis. So if we click on axis title there and highlight axis title and replace that with the variable that is going on that axis, and in this case, whoops, it is force, and we are measuring force in newtons. So we now have as an axis title force in newtons. We do the same with the axis title for our x-axis, which is mass measured in kilograms. So we now have the axis titles as well as a title for our graph. Over here, this force versus mass we don't need, so we can get rid of that. There's one more thing we need to do to this graph. Under the chart tools, under layout, you have this function here called a trend line. Now for this particular graph we want a linear trend line, but depending on the data that you have, you can have different kinds of trend lines. Another word for a trend line here is a line of best fit. So we're going to click on linear trend line, and you'll notice that a line of best fit between those data points has now been inserted into our graph.